everyone. I know it may seem strange that you read chapter 1 in week 2, but we definitely had to hit the ground running last week as we were beginning on this journey of compressing an entire 16-week semester into 5 weeks for you here in early start. Okay, so today we're going to take some time and we're going to explore models of communication that your book discussed, and I'm going to tell you how those relate to the discipline of communication. So as I have mentioned before, I'm the Director of Public Relations for the Brian Lamb School of Communication here at Purdue. I'm also a graduate of that program. I did my graduate work here, and it is the area in which I teach and practice. And so we'll expose you a little bit to this discipline and talk about the different ways that it takes shape. And then at the end of this video, I'll tell you what's next. All right, so communication, it's something it's almost like we're fish in water. We don't even know that it's going on. But the National Communication Association defines communication as in this way. So communication focuses on how people use messages to generate meanings within and across various contexts, and is the discipline that studies all forms, modes, media, and consequences of communication through humanistic, social scientific, and aesthetic inquiry. So why does it matter? Communication is one of the oldest disciplines on earth. It impacts everything we do as individuals, organizations, families, friends, societies, and it helps us either succeed in our work or creates barriers to success and progress. So the study of communication is rooted in the ancient disciplines of rhetoric and persuasion and is much more consequential than the simple diagrams of communication models might suggest on their own. So Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they were concerned with more than just how information is transmitted. They were concerned with how we understand, interact in, and co-create, create together reality. So when you think about it, if you can just pause with me for just a second, communication is really a miracle. So the fact that I can get something that exists in my mind, in the trappings of my context and experiences and perspectives, the fact that I can get that to leave my mind and get into your mind, and that then we can act together in a cooperative way because of that transfer of ideas to create wonderful or terrible things, that's crazy cool. Communication is how societies were formed and how they continue to develop. It's the foundation for our relationships, not just in a counseling sense, like good and open communication is the bedrock of any healthy healthy relationship, but like in the most literal sense. If you were unable to communicate at all, your ability to be in any kind of relationship, even one as everyday as a customer and a cashier, would be non-existent. So as we review these models for communication, don't make the mistake of thinking that these diagrams are all there is to communication. This is really just the beginning. All right, so moving forward, we want to look at these diagrams. So here we have the linear model of communication, and you can see it's just going in one direction. So let me see. Oh, I've got to go the opposite way. That's confusing. All right. So despite its limitations, and it's going in one direction from sender to channel. This is really confusing, you guys. It's backwards. To noise, to receiver. You can see it. The linear model really represents what our intuitive understanding of communication is, which in some ways is helpful, but also can be really unhelpful, as we'll explore. We know that this is our default understanding of communication because without thinking about it, we use language that describes communication in this way. So there's a book called Metaphors We Live By Lakoff and Johnson, and they write, since communication is based on the same conceptual system that we use in thinking and acting, language is an important source of evidence for what that system is like. So in other words, the way we naturally talk about communication reveals how we think about it. So the primary metaphor that's at work in the way we naturally discuss communication is a conduit metaphor, which is the concept that we have this discrete idea and that we package it up in a message and it moves along a predetermined path to get from point A to point B. So some examples of how this conduit metaphor is revealed in our everyday talk through conceptual metaphors include, it's hard to get that idea across to him, like we're moving something, or I gave you that idea. It's something that I packaged up and you can have it, or you stole it. Your reasons came through to us, so they made it through this path. It's difficult to put my ideas into words. It's hard to package them. When you have an idea, try to capture it immediately. Try to pack more thought into fewer words. The meaning is right there in the words, and her words carry little meaning, or the idea is buried in dense paragraphs. So even though this model, the sender channel noise receiver model, seems overly simplistic, especially as we move on and look at the other ones, it's oftentimes how we think about communication. That default can be really problematic when we're trying to improve our communication or understand instances of miscommunication, which we'll explore more later. All right, so now we have the interactive model of communication, and we can see that this is a little bit better, right? It recognizes that there's kind of this loop going on. We could just as easily have this arrow, you guys, this is really distracting, this arrow over on the other side. You know what I mean? So we could just as easily just say this is a cyclical thing that's going on. Communication, I send you a message, through a channel, there's noise around it, but you get it as the receiver, and then you as the receiver become the sender, and it goes back through the channel, and it goes through the noise, and it comes back to me as the receiver. And so it's the same idea, except it recognizes that this is an ongoing process and that we can switch roles. And again, the way we talk about communication really reinforces this idea. All right, so then we get to the most nuanced and most, I think, most accurate model if we're going to try and put this crazy phenomenon of getting things out of my head and putting them in yours. And did you hear that? Did you hear how that metaphor, even as I'm trying to talk about a different model of communication, that conduit metaphor is still the way we use our words. So if we're going to try and put this crazy process into a model, I think the best one is this transactional model that your book discusses. So we understand that at the same time, when we are having when we are communicating, I am both sender and a receiver. I am both encoding my words and decoding what you are communicating to me, even if you're not talking, right? Like I can read, if we were in class together, I would be able to see if when I'm presenting this information to you, I was going too fast, or it was making sense, or you were confused, or you were looking out the window if we were lucky enough to have a classroom with a window, or if you were maybe focused on, I don't know, online shopping in front of you. It's all within the context of what's going on our channel, but we have simultaneous feedback from each other, and this is all going on at once. And so if we are going to have a model of communication, scholars agree that this is the most nuanced and most complete model. But it's not enough. It's not enough to say that this is our understanding of communication, because even when we adhere to this model, there is this ghost, this intuitive ghost that creates psychological noise of this is really how we think about communication, is in this linear model. So even if you and I agree that communication is complex and there are all these simultaneous processes going on, if we have, if we have a miscommunication, and I just can't get it. I can't understand why you don't understand. I sent you the message. It should be that simple, right? And even though we have this more complex model in the transactional model, this ghost of the linear model still colors our thinking. And this is important because understanding how we are unconsciously and subconsciously shaped by the linear model provides a really important context for us in all communication, but especially in high stakes instances and instances of miscommunication. Sometimes we have to take a moment, back out and say, ooh, you know what? We are operating under a way too simplistic idea here about how communication could work. And so we need to better understand the context of all the different simultaneous things you and I are doing as communicators here. All right. So moving forward, these questions of how communication work, like how we can understand it, how we can improve it, it's not just so that we have some cool, colorful charts to show you. These are questions that are important to building the skills you need to have strong verbal communication skills. So your book mentions how key verbal communication skills are to success at a college level, and that's because it's key to success beyond college. So the reason why this course is required of nearly every person who steps on this campus as an undergraduate student is because Purdue recognizes that for you to be able to succeed, you need more than just your specific knowledge area. It doesn't matter if you are the brightest engineer on the block or the most impactful business major with the best ideas. If you can't communicate with other people, then those ideas stay with you and they don't go out into the world. They don't change the world. So employers need employees who have solid communication skills, and that's why we're focusing on this. So these questions of how communication works are also foundational to the continued academic study and applied practice of communication. And these questions take different forms in different subdisciplines and specialties within communication. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just give you a hint at how complex communication can be, the different ways that you can study it here at Purdue by focusing on the 8 concentrations within the communication major. So you can see just what this discipline encompasses. All right, so general communication is a kind of our catch-all concentration, but students use this concentration to really shape their own degree. So for example, we don't have a sports marketing or sports broadcasting concentration, but students who are interested in sports broadcasting and perhaps sports management will take a general communication concentration and pull classes together to make that kind of specialty. You really can make a custom major here, and so we do have just the general communication concentration. We also have a business communication concentration, and I know that at least one of you in this class is planning on majoring in communication with a concentration in business communication. So the driving questions in this area are: how can we be better at business with and because of communication? How can we best communicate in competitive environments? How can we communicate best in global and intercultural environments? And what is the role of communication in business in shaping its culture, in shaping its productivity, and in helping it to reach goals? All right, communicating science and technology. So how can we translate, the big questions here are: how can we translate complex and technical ideas into language that everyone can understand? How can we get the non-experts, including policymakers or funding bodies, to appreciate the importance of our technical problems and solutions? And how can we convince people that science and technical expertise matters? So we are a very big STEM campus, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But if you don't have the ability to translate that into information and messages that matter to people who don't share your expertise, then it's not going to have as much of an impact as it could. So not only actually do we have this concentration in communicating Communicating Science and Technology, we have, in addition to our general communication minor, we have a communication minor for STEM students that specifically focuses on classes that help you to have this important, really, translation skill from the specific language of your expertise to lay audiences. All right, health communications. Driving questions for this area include, how do we communicate health changes and interventions to people who are resistant to change or who may not have the technical and expert knowledge to understand health issues? How do people make decisions in risk-intense environments? How can we improve doctor-patient or doctor-caregiver communication? And what are the physical implications of poor doctor-patient communication? You don't have to think very hard to come up with some important examples of why health communication matters so much right now while we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? We have to convince people to wear masks, and it's uncomfortable. We have to make sure that people are being mindful of staying home when they're sick, all these different messages, and getting rid of really dangerous misinformation, right? Like home remedies for COVID and these different types of things. So health communication, really important field. All right, interpersonal communication. Driving questions in this would be, how do dynamics between people impact the outcomes in families, businesses, teams, communities, and other environments? Why are some interpersonal interactions more effective than others? How do people seek support from each other with whom they are close? How and why do people seek support from other people online, people they may not know? So there's a lot of actually social media research that goes on in this area of communication. And then how do online interactions impact real life experiences and vice versa? So very important as we're all learning to do more and more virtually and distance than we have in the past. Media and mass communication, so some driving questions here. What is the most effective and ethical way to share information? How can technical advances aid mass communication? How can technical advances be barriers to effective mass communication? And how can we effectively communicate with diverse audiences? So really big questions here. And of course, students who have this concentration are typically looking to go into journalism, broadcasting, filmmaking, lots of different areas related to media and mass communication. All right, political and civic communication. So driving questions here would be, how do groups of people make decisions? How do people with differing opinions interact? How can experts and non-experts work together for positive change? How are different types of communicators perceived? And how does that help or hurt civic processes? How does communication form communities or community action groups? How do people communicate nuance in issues that have been unhelpfully distilled to dichotomies? So like you're either this or you're that. Well, you could be anywhere on a spectrum there. So this is a really important area, especially in our school. I told you we're named the Brian Lamb School of Communication. Brian Lamb is an alumnus of Purdue University who graduated with a degree in communication, and he is the founder of C-SPAN. So we also have the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement that really helps people to beef up on their political and civic communication and to research, of course, and practice in that area. All right, and then finally, my home within communication, public relations and strategic communication. So driving questions in this field, what relationships with different publics are key to the success of an organization or cause? How can we communicate to help us, or rather, how can communication help us to mediate those relationships in such a way that we understand and shape expectations and experiences? How can organizations be ethical participants in relationships? How do the actions of an organization or the entities with whom it is in relationship impact an environment or system? So I mentioned a lot of times when people ask me what public relations is, I am a relationship counselor for organizations. So that is, you can expand the metaphor of somebody who helps people manage their own relationships and live their own best life to somebody who helps an organization manage its relationships and live its best life. All right, so that is a quick overview of things that you can study within communication. Just a note, in addition to the majors and the minors, if you are in a STEM major and you're looking to really beef up your communication skills, the Purdue College of Liberal Arts makes it easy to add a second major within liberal arts, where you don't have to take the liberal arts core. So talk to me, talk to your advisor if you're interested in adding more communication to your studies here at Purdue. I promise it will not hurt you in your career. It will only help you get better. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I really want you to start to engage with this idea of different communication models at work and noticing everything that's going on. Kind of just taking a pause and noticing what's at work when we're communicating. It's something we often take for granted. So below I have linked one of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite shows. It's from the opening scene of episode 4 of season 1 of The West Wing, and it's a really famous scene because it's like the longest Steadicam single shot walk and talk scene that was created at the time, and I don't know if anybody else has beat it yet, but it's a crazy scene. There's a lot going on. And so what I'd like you to do is to watch it and then engage with some of these questions. You don't necessarily have to answer all of them. I just want to make sure you have a really thorough response. So go back and look at that rubric for activities that's in the syllabus and engage with some of these questions in a written response on the discussion board. So what do you see going on in terms of communication process? What messages? What different roles in that process are people playing? Nonverbal cues? What kinds of noise and the impact that it had on what was going on? What the purpose of the different conversations was? How they were displayed or impacted by the different elements of the process. So show me that you understand what we're talking about when we talk about the processes and the models of communication, and show me that you've paid attention to the video. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I'll look forward to reading your responses soon.